All right, guys, this is Genesis Ward with Sozo Education and Beauty Supply. This is one of the videos on my dedication to try to record this particular competition year, like every single one of the competitions that I competed in order to be able to share it with you guys to hopefully help someone else who is starting out competing and has no idea where to begin like I once was. This happened to be the 3D nail art entry for the Pasadena 2019 Cinco de Mayo theme. So I want to start off by saying, there's a lot of things that I did wrong, or not necessarily wrong, I guess, but really wrong when all comes down to it. Because of some new rules that had entered in, and I kind of didn't know some of the history of why certain rules were in place and what have you. So hopefully I can share a little bit of that with you. My idea in approaching this was to go with literally like the kind of historical background of it. I really couldn't come up with a twist onto the theme, which if you can do that, that's going to get you more points in your originality category. So I had the idea of creating a book that would open up and have all of the history pieces for the people who played a large part, or the situations that played a large part in Cinco de Mayo. So definitely struggled with a lot of different ways to do this. This is probably about the third time that I began trying to attempt this whole thing. So long story short, for the background pieces, I would have done these a little bit differently. For one, instead of creating the solid background where it kind of looks like a tile, if you will, and there's a reason why I use that word, we'll get into it in a minute, I would have done the tips as a base, because you need to be able to, at the end of all of this, take those tips and apply them onto someone's fingers. So they should have like the natural curvature at the bottom and what have you. What I did right here was laid out a really thin sheet of acrylic that I had rolled out in between two sheet protectors, and then I used a heated blade there that you would use for, what am I thinking, like metal working tools. You can find them at Hobby Lobby for working with like metal crafts, and that blade heats up so it makes it really easy to slice through that acrylic. And I would have done that part of it on the top of this. Once you have a good thin sheet of that product and you can then put it onto there, you can add more acrylic onto the top of that easier from having that thin sheet. So, sorry, to backtrack a little bit, you need to have the tips on the underneath be able to adhere to their fingers. Even though this is the 3D art turn-in, the idea is you would want them to ultimately be on someone's fingers to be able to tell the story. So the first part of the book at the top could go on her left hand, and the bottom part of the book could go on the model's right hand. But because I created that solid base up underneath of it, you can't really do that in the traditional method. I did make sure on the tops and the bottoms of them to be able to show that there is a tip on the underneath of there. But historically, some of the technicians were creating tiles. They may have been made out of acrylic, or who possibly knows. And it was taking away from the art of being able to do it on the normal size nail tip, or the structure of a nail tip, I guess. So they really don't like seeing things like this. However, there was a rule that had come into play where they wanted the nail art on the tips to be no wider than 1 inch and no longer than 2 inches. And I wanted to make sure that under no circumstances would I break this rule, because if the base structure of it was that size, then I wouldn't have to worry about going outside of it. It was easier for me to come with a design in my head, I guess, knowing that no matter what, this was in place. So I wouldn't have gotten marked down for not meeting that rule. Yet I didn't know that they would consider them to be like tiles, and that's not something that they prefer to be able to see. So I could have still done the background the way that I wanted it to, but just not had that flat part on the underneath so the tips could adhere really well, and done more like free-flowing pages, if you will. Something else that was outside of the rules, and I didn't even think about it at all, was the part that I'm doing right now. So you have to make these nails out of everything nail products. And because we use foils to have a base to be able to create like people and animals and stuff from, which is not a nail product, and we use string or wire that aren't necessarily sold by nail companies, I didn't even think to use the piece of paper. I went on to Word and sized it all out with the actual historical story behind Cinco de Mayo, and then went through and antiqued it and everything, because I thought it would serve as a meaningful background, which for me to go through and hand paint it after I had already struggled for hours and wasted tons of tips and things trying to create this base, I just decided to take an easy way out, knowing that most of all of this was going to be covered anyway. And I ended up losing points for that because of the fact that the paper itself is not considered to be a nail product. I guess I could have printed it on the 3D, or not 3D, but nail decal paper, transfer paper. And because you have decals that are done that way, that would have then made it classified as using a nail product. But nonetheless, this whole entire beginning part of it was a massive failure in that particular department. What you see me doing now is going through and creating page details. So I used a very, very tiny circular bit to go in and make it look like the thickness was pages carved into the sides. See, that one was my favorite. I used the tip in the opposite direction to be able to create that look of the spine of the book. I really thought that I was quite ingenious, even though it was a failure in this sense. Everything else that I put on top of here was really awesome, and I was very proud of everything, and I got very good commentary on. It was just the background that definitely could have been much better. So for my originality, there are 5 points that were available total for this competition, and I got a 2 out of 5. The reason being is because everything that I did on here was all literally about Cinco de Mayo. I did not try to take a twist on it and really approached it from a different direction, because I really couldn't think of anything. But ideally, if you can be creative enough to take it outside of the box, you're going to get more points for that. On the visual interest, I ended up getting a 6 out of 10 possible. I was okay with that. I did a lot of people, which you will see, as we go throughout this one, and really put a lot of work to everything on top of that. I thought that my color, I got a 5 out of 10. I definitely thought that could have been higher, because I felt like my use of color and the color range was very good with all of the different pieces, that it came together well. It matched the theme. There was no one color that was overpowering another. So not quite sure on that one, but again, this is kind of a category that it's all up to the judges' perception of what they want to see out of this. So I'm going to step away. And then my presentation, I got a 2 out of 5. And the reason why I got a 2 out of 5 is because of the fact that they consider them to be tile pieces, and that I did not follow the rules by having the piece of paper in there. Both of those things were point deductions that happened to come about in several different areas, but presentation was a bigger one for it. So, okay, going into the video again, what you saw me doing is something that I use all the time to be able to get proper structure or placement, sizing and ratios when I'm doing the nail art. I'll find a reference piece, and then on my iPad, I could do it directly on it because I have a screen protector on it, but I wanted to use the cellophane, saran wrap on there so I could peel it up and then put it onto my artwork once I had the base. So I sized up my piece to make sure it was going to fit within that 1 inch by 2 inch tip length, and then used the natural colored acrylics to start being able to create the base of the face, and then just slowly built everything up on top of it once I transferred it to my nail tip that it was going to ultimately be on. By finish sculpting it in the area where it's going to ultimately be, it's going to have the proper curvature and everything, so I could then go in and adhere it onto there, and it's going to be a flawless adhesion. I also wanted to make it be a little bit more 3D on top of it, even though what I'm creating are like flat faces essentially. So by using the acrylic, once I was done, to be able to adhere them onto it, it can give it a little bit more of a pop off of the base of the book that I had created. I think these were the best faces that I have done so far. I was really proud of how the eyes looked. They were very realistic. It's something that takes a lot of time to be able to build up, and how soft the faces looked, because again, different techniques that I've learned from educators over the years, that it really helped me to make this piece on point. I was very, very happy with all of my work on top of this for all the work I had done so far. Basically, I really had felt like I was coming into my own on these types of pieces. What you see me working on right now is my metal working board. This is something that I do sell on the Sozo Education and Beauty Supply.com. With me using the magnets on the up underneath portion of the tip, it will adhere to these boards really well. So it's hard to hold the tips smaller sometimes, and this gives me a little bit of, I guess, even though the metal piece itself is kind of large, it's easier to hold it overall. My hands don't get as cramped with it, and it stays secure in place. As well as if you were doing artwork that for, like, say, hand painted, or things that you wanted to match up when one tip touched another, you could have them magnet and put them close or put them slightly farther apart, depending on which piece that you're working on, to make sure that the transition from one tip to the other is absolutely flawless. It's definitely worth it, and because of the fact that it's the metal, they're totally washable with the acetone to get off anything that you might get on top of them. And as you can see here, I'm able to lay out all of my pieces and arrange them as I'm working on that board, to be able to kind of play and know, because of the fact that that board, the metal working board, is 6 by 8 inches. For the NailPro competitions, that is their particular size. So again, however I arrange them on that board, I know that they're going to fit in my ultimate, my end display. And it gives me a little bit more freedom to stay within the rules, but be creative. Because a lot of times when you're working on all of this stuff, you kind of lose sight of what the rules are and where things need to be. So by having it set up like this, I already know that where my outline essentially is, and that everything's going to fit in the end of this whole thing. So I'm gonna, while I continue to make my people on here, I'm gonna read to you what my description was. By all means, you don't have to be this detailed in everything, but normally the judge that will be judging this portion, they will read through it, and you want to tell them like a cute story. Make them, understand why you did what you did, and take the chance to be able to explain the things that they're going to see in your artwork, as well as another portion of this. So you're supposed to do a short description, and then also do another one of what you used product wise to be able to put the piece together. This is an area where if you use something special to create something, that I would put it in that place, because if they find it to be more complex the way you did it versus, say, taking a simple way out, then that could be something that would get you more points depending on, who your judge is or what category that they're judging. All right, let's dive deep into the actual history of Cinco de Mayo by opening a history book. Cinco de Mayo is Spanish for the 5th of May and is an annual celebration held on May 5th. The date is observed to commemorate the Mexican Army's victory over the French Empire at the Battle of Puebla on May 5th, 1862, under the leadership of General Ignacio Zaragoza. I'm so not into, I'm going to mess up all the names in here. But, in the United States, Cinco de Mayo has taken on a significance beyond that in Mexico. More popularly celebrated in the United States than Mexico, the date has become associated with the celebration of Mexican American culture. In Mexico, the commemoration of the battle continues to be mostly ceremonial, such as military parades or battle reenactments. And from some of my, this is a side note, from some of my people that I know from Mexico, they say that it's really cool to actually see these things happening. So if you are in Puebla, it's a cool thing that they really do. Okay, Cinco de Mayo is sometimes mistaken for Mexico's Independence Day, the most important national holiday in Mexico, which is celebrated on September 16th, commemorating the Cry of Dolores that initiated the War of Mexican Independence from Spain. Events leading to the Battle of Puebla. Cinco de Mayo has its roots in Second French intervention in Mexico, which took place in the aftermath of the 1846 through 1848 Mexican-American War and the 1858 through 61 Reform War. The Reform War was a civil war that pitted liberals who believed in the separation of church and state and the freedom of religion. I put this portion in there because in my nail tips, there is a tip that I do the separation of church and state. So again, my description has to do with what exactly and who I have on the nails. Okay. Against conservatives who favored a tight bond between the Catholic Church and the Mexican state. These wars nearly bankrupted the Mexican treasury. On July 17, 1861, the Mexican president Benito Juarez issued a memorandum in which all foreign debt payments should be suspended for 2 years. This is also something that I illustrated on the nail by making the Mexican dollar bills, the money that would have been used at that time. 2 years. In response, Britain, France, and Spain sent naval forces to Veracruz to demand reimbursement. Britain and Spain negotiated with Mexico and withdrew, but France, at the time ruled by Napoleon III, decided to use the opportunity to establish an empire in Mexico that would favor French interests. The Second Mexican Empire, the empire was part of an envisioned Latin America, term used to imply cultural kinship of the region with France, that would rebuild French influence in the American continent and exclude American territories. French invasion and Mexico victory. Late in 1861, a well-armed French fleet stormed Veracruz, landing a large French force and dividing President Juarez and his government into retreat, moving on from Veracruz towards Mexico City. The French army encountered heavy resistance from the Mexicans close to Puebla. At the Mexican forts of Laredo and Guadalupe, the French army of 8,000 attacked the poorly equipped Mexican army of 4,000 on May 5th, 1862. The Mexicans decisively defeated the French army. The victory represented a significant morale boost to the Mexican army and the people at large, and helped establish a scene of national unity and patriotism. So all of the names that you heard inside of that description are all of the people that I depicted on all of the nails, the different generals and what have you. The last portion of the description was used just to say what I used product-wise to be able to create the different people. I have used acrylic traditional gel, gel polish, and acrylic paints to complete my design. All of the bling on his chest was handmade. Only bullion was used around one of the red stones. The people depicted are Napoleon III, the Mexican president Benito Juarez, Charles Lawrence, General Ignacio, and Porfirio Diaz, whom later became president, as well as the mariachi band and dancers to show how Puebla celebrates this holiday. The Americans have turned it into a day of drinking and eating. Most don't even know why they celebrate. So again, it depends on who is going to be actually doing the judging as to whether or not they would care that you went more in depth to this. But my idea is I would never want to get lower than the top presentation points. So I take the time to explain what's going on in the tips as best as possible. This was the first time where I had gotten a 2 out of 5 for my presentation, which was so upsetting to me because it's one of those scores that you have no reason to get anything less than that, because all you have to do for the presentation is follow the rules, make sure things are clean cut. Like, it's so simple. So I was really, really hard on myself with that particular judging category. The next judge was for balance, design and detail, dimension, and then overall impression. So for balance, I got a 2 out of 5. Design and detail, I got a 7 out of 10, which that score I'm okay with, because I mean, it's on the higher side, and I did feel like I did a lot more detailed work within everything. Dimension, I got a 7 out of 10. Also something I'm happy with. There was many layers to everything that I did. It wasn't just all flat nail art like what the people that you're seeing I'm doing right now were more so flat and built up. I did do some other things. And then the overall impression, a 3 out of 10. That one, not so impressed with. I really feel it goes back to the tile situation where they were not too hot on my background. So this was another area where it showed through, because it was hard to see that the tips were on the underneath of this, and they felt like I could do it better, I guess, than just having it look like a tile. And then for the last judge, it was complexity, which I got a 5 out of 10. Workmanship is a 6 out of 10. Tip length is a 4 out of 10. 4 out of 5, which that's a whole nother different situation. There were for that specific category, every single one of them was 2 inches long, so there should have been no reason why I got a lower score on that one. I literally used a gauge, the electronic gauge, to be able to show the length of each tip. So whether they saw something that was slightly off, I don't know, but it really, tip length is another thing that you should never lose points for. It's so basic and easy to get accurate that it's really ridiculous if you don't. And then the theme, I got an 8 out of 10, which, I'm happy with that one. So overall, my total score was 57 points. Not really happy about that. In general, when you were talking about your placements, like your first, second, and third places, they would be, in the mid 70s to kind of mid 80s would be your top ranking people. So for me, this, it was a very sad 3D in some ways, but I still learned a lot by doing it, and I also got brought into a little bit more of the history of things that used to be in place. And upon talking with the judges, as I do after every single competition, she actually showed me some of the work to use as an example of why they have guided the rules to be where they are, which was super interesting to be able to see that transition. And when it comes to the rules, something I used to do was look at other people's work so I could get an idea of what was expected. But the slight problem with that is you could be looking at a first place person and they still had something wrong with their nails, or the rules have changed even in from one competition to another, because they decided to add something or take something away for whatever reason. So you can't just look at other people's work in order to help you understand the rules. You have to ask more questions. And literally, you guys, like this whole 1 inch wide by 2 inches long, that rule took the entire year to get clarified, essentially, because the way that they were stating it, like we were misunderstanding it. And so I wasn't the only one, thank goodness, because I was going absolutely nuts. But now understanding what they're looking for, they felt like the work was getting too outrageous for it to be considered nail art. So instead of just having the restrictions in place of having the board be 6 by 8 and anything you can fit in there is, it goes, they wanted to bring it back to more authentic nail art instead of like these massive murals or what have you. So I understand that part, and I've really got to find a way mentally for me to, stay within those guidelines and still be able to create something that, would be meaningful with all of this. Like, I could have just done the writing across the tips, not even made it look like a history book, which I still think was cool. But anyway, just done the writing across the tips and then added my people on top of that were within that range, and that would have gotten me higher score. It would have been way less work. Honestly, I could have done hand-painted letters and things and would have gotten a higher score for the detail if all of that was hand-painted on the underneath of there. So even though I'm really not happy with my score, I am very happy with everything that I learned during all of this. And the initial upload for all of the videos before I did it in the fast forward was just under 8 hours. So for that to be condensed down to 47 minutes is really crazy. And I didn't even record everything. Some of the stuff you saw in the beginning was recorded while I was still at home. This particularly, I had flown into Pasadena a couple days early because it's easier for you to kind of like get set up, get in the game, start practicing if you get in, you know, that a day ahead of time. So this was me trying to finish everything in that couple days ahead in more peace and quiet than what I normally would be working in at home. And I tried to video as much as I could, but when you're down to the wire, it like trying to turn on the video and stay in the shot and everything, really you lose it because you're trying to get as much detail in there as possible. And for most every single competition, I work down to the very last minute of me turning everything in. There, I could be still adding rhinestones on or adding like minor details as someone else is driving or the Uber like on the way to the convention center, because you never know what little extra details that could make all the difference. And at this point in time, we were competing in 5 competitions throughout the year, and all the points added up to the cup at the end. So with maybe, you know, a month or so in between every competition, and competing in the hand painted, the nail art, as well as all the structure competitions in person, it doesn't leave you with a lot of time to be able to create all these things. And hours upon hours, like never underestimate how long it's going to take you to do all of these things. Even once you get better at it and you have like good ideas in mind and everything, it still will take you hours to complete these things. So start on it as early as you can and push yourself as much as you can in the beginning, because normally leading up to the competitions, I will not sleep besides in the Uber rides or, you know, back and forth to the hotel or on the plane, because your adrenaline is going like no other, trying to get all of the little last pieces in place pretty much. So I don't know what else I can really say to prepare better for all these things, but if you guys have any questions at any point in time, please don't hesitate to reach out. I love being able to help out new competitors. It took a lot of time for me to make all these videos and get everything together, and I'm sorry it's taken me so long to post this stuff, but I wanted to be able to get it out because I know how much I would have appreciated things like these. And you still need to go and take classes, by all means. There's some really great people out there to learn from in our industry. I've taken so many of the techniques and combined tons of different things from the different people. So by no means is this meant to be, you know, a technique specific video, but just to kind of show you how all this stuff comes together. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask all of the judges as well, leading up into it, both past and present judges, because they are very helpful with what to expect. You know, they're still passionate about all of this stuff and really want to make the competitions be the best that they can. And the only way to do that is to lift up all of the nail artists. They can tell you, you know, who would be good people to take classes from if you need more of hand painting art or what have you. So don't hesitate to reach out to them. They have all been very helpful to me and my growth in such a short amount of time. With that, I'm gonna leave you here to watch the rest of it. Hope you guys have an amazing competition wherever you're headed, and we'll see you in the next one.